in my zone.
Hey, this is Zero at ReviewZoneHD, and I'm bringing you guys a review for Unchained Blades, which released as a download for the Nintendo 3DS at the start of this year. This is going to be an interesting review because I have a lot to say about this title, but before I go any further, I need to explain one thing, and that is I've only put 10 hours into this game. I've read this is a 40 to 60 hour game to complete, so I've really only scratched the surface in game time of what this one has to offer. But I've played enough to form a really strong opinion of it, and I wanted to go ahead and do this review now because I'm about to get slammed with 2 or 3 weeks straight of games that I'm going to need to cover and review. But I wanted to be honest and get that out of the way up front because I know a few people are going to have an issue with the fact that I only played 10 hours, but when you stop and think for a minute, 10 hours is a pretty long time to play most games. Now, another reason I stopped at the 10-hour mark is because I just didn't want to play it anymore and I had seen enough. Now, with that said, this is not a horrible game by any means, but I personally was not enjoying playing this one, and I'm about to dive into the reasons why in just a moment. I had decided to pick this game up a couple weeks back after I played the demo for Etrian Odyssey 4, a game that I've really been thoroughly enjoying playing this week, and I watched a trailer for this title and I thought it looked somewhat similar, decided to give it a try. And those two titles are similar in that they're both first-person JRPGs that require a lot of grinding and a lot of patience, but the similarities pretty much end right there, especially when looking at the graphics. This game just doesn't look that good, and there's really no 3D effect at all, to the point that I had to go and double check to make sure this was actually a 3DS title. It adds a slight haze when you turn the 3D all the way up, and you can see the 3D ever so slightly in certain parts, but it's really not that good of an effect. But when I was playing this, the entire time that I was playing, I was sitting there thinking to myself, how is this a game that just released in 2013? The mechanics of the game and the look of it just felt so dated, and after I did a little bit of research, I realized this game actually released originally back in the middle of 2011 in Japan for the PSP, which could explain a lot about why the 3D just doesn't look good on here. But it looks like a game that was created even much earlier than that, and I didn't realize this when I decided to go pick it up because I couldn't find any type of information other than the trailer for it on YouTube. And once I got several hours in, I started to realize this game felt a lot like Wizardry Labyrinth of Lost Souls, which that title was also published by the same guys that did this game, Xseed. Now, I hated that Wizardry game. It's the second worst game that I've played on the PlayStation 3. I thought that was a complete ripoff because you pay $15 to explore 2 dungeons, and then you had to pay even more for expansions that let you travel a little bit further down, and when everything's said and done, you end up having to pay $29 for an extremely repetitive game. Now, this game is a lot like that one, and it also costs $30, but Unchained Blades is a much better game in my opinion. The gameplay does evolve, and there's some pretty interesting features such as capturing enemies to add to your party setup, and they basically defend and help attack whoever they're attached to, and you can attach up to 4 monsters to each person in your group, and that very well could be this title's saving grace, because if you take that feature out of here, you're getting close to the gameplay from the Wizardry title. Now, if you want to play a game like that, like a 1980s first-person JRPG, then you're most likely going to enjoy this game, but here are the reasons why I personally just couldn't get into it. For starters, your main character is an absolute douchebag, and that's something that I've never said on this channel. This character is a douchebag. I mean, there's no other way to put it. He's arrogant, he's snobby, he's cocky, just not a character that you would even want to root for or associate yourself with. And the story starts off with him insulting a higher power as his dragon form. The higher power gets mad, transforms him into a human, and then tosses him down to earth. That sounds pretty cool, and it should have made for a very awesome storyline, but the dialogue seems like it was written by like an angry 12-year-old lashing out. And the way that your party members join up with you is basically you're walking around in a dark dungeon, you bump into one of them, you have 3 sentences of conversation like, oh hey, you're in this dark dungeon? Me too. Let's go ahead and hold hands and go kill a bunch of monsters together for the next 8 hours. I mean, you might as well forget about the story. Next is the dungeons. The layouts are really good, the shortcuts were placed in good areas, it's easy to travel around and figure out where you need to go. The combat's decent, the monsters look okay, but everything just looks the same, and everything is very dull, very bland, dreary, uninspired, boring. I mean, it absolutely sucks the life out of this game. When I turn this off and I cut Etrian Odyssey on, and I'm visiting very colorful, vibrant areas with awesome looking monsters to fight, and sweet looking menus, very colorful special effects, I'm sure you guys can understand right then and there why I decided to stop at 10 hours on this game when I have a vastly superior game to play and review. It's night night and day between those two games. On Unchained Blades, you do have a very expansive skill tree, but it takes so many levels before you feel like you're making any progress at all in making your character stronger or acquiring any actual useful skills. And the entire time that I played, I never had a game over, but with that said, it was challenging at times. Another reason you don't feel like you're making any progress is because there's locked doors everywhere that you go, and once you get a key, you have to backtrack through the same areas that you've ran through 100 times over again, and it really just gets tiresome going back and forth through the same areas. Another part of this game that gets old really quickly was the enemies that you capture have personalities, and you have to appease them to increase your own charisma rating. After one of these pets in your party levels up after battle, they'll say something completely irrelevant to you like, "Oh, I'm scared and I don't want to fight," and then you have a few options with how to answer them, and most of the time the answers just don't make any sense at all. And I tried answering the way that I thought I should, and it just never worked. Finally I gave up and I kept selecting the same answer over and over again, and it came up and worked 90% of the time correctly, but that whole system is just a mess. And yes, I know I've spent most of this entire review ripping on this game, and it's not because I hate this game and I think it's trash. It's just not a very good game, especially for the price when you line it up next to almost any other new JRPG or even RPG that's released on the handheld in the last few years. It's not a bad game, it's just not very good. It's certainly not one that I would recommend, and if you want to play a game similar to this, I would highly recommend just paying the extra $10 for Atrian Odyssey 4, which is a much better game all around. $30 is just a bit too steep for this title, even if it does offer 40 to 60 hours of gameplay, but you have to keep in mind 90% of that time is going to be spent grinding on the same boring enemies in the same boring environment. Anyways, that's all I got for this video. This is Zero at ReviewZoneHD. Thanks for stopping by. Meow.